and more about, okay, how are we planning? How are we putting these 5 years, 5 years from now? What is the general strategy? Of course, artists shouldn't have a roadmap. It's not about that. But how do we actually bring something together that makes sense for the audience, that makes sense for the collectors? And how do we also, in a way, the reality is like, look, even if there's many collectors that are doing actually this for the culture, everybody would lie if they told you that they're okay with losing value or losing money along the way. It's just not human nature. We don't nobody likes to lose value. So how do you also protect a little bit of the interest of the counterparty that is actually supporting your career and your practice moving forward?
GM, we're back. Alejandro, what are we celebrating? What are these fireworks for? You're kicking it off a little early.
I gotta kick it off early as always, man. Today I'm celebrating a new haircut. I let go of some, I shredded about 4 or 5 inches. Sometimes you gotta do the spiritual cleanse as well. Season of Lent has been amazing for me. So, symbolically releasing something. But speaking of releases, we're coming up on a new episode today. So who do we have on?
Yeah, very excited for this episode. We have Pablo Rodriguez-Fraile, major collector in the space, the curator and caretaker of the RFC art collection, guy who's been early to so many of the big names in the space, from Beeple to Rafik Anadol, and a champion of a lot of artists. Also known for his spicy takes. So very excited to dive into it with him. What excites you about this one, Ale?
Matt, Pablo is an incredibly kind human being. He, I've had the privilege to, create inroads with him on a personal basis. He invited me over to his house to show us the art and the way it's presented, and he's so intentional. So I'm just really looking forward to finding out more what's behind that intentionality. He's a man of many moves, but they're very calculated. He's playing 4D chess. So I'm really interested to find out what the intentionality behind those moves are. What about you, Matt?
Yeah, no, I mean, look, he's been early to a lot of the movers and shakers in the space. I think that he brings an interesting sensibility coming from the traditional art world, but I think he's quite savvy in the crypto native, digital art world. So he's got a very unique perspective and not afraid to ruffle feathers. So I'm sure we'll get into it with him. Before we do, I want to invite you, if you don't already, please do subscribe to our weekly newsletter, nftnow.com/newsletter. Each week, we distill everything happening in the space, all this bull market mayhem, into actionable insights straight to your inbox. But without any further ado, Pablo on the NFT Now podcast. This is one that has been in the making for quite some time, man. How you doing?
I'm doing very well. It's such a pleasure to be here with both of you. I'm really looking forward to this conversation. Thank you very much for having me.
Man, Pablo, it's been a long time coming. You've been an incredible friend to me and to our company. So thank you so much for every effort that you've made for us, first and foremost. And secondly, you've been an incredible patron of the arts, specifically in digital art, since the 2020s, 2021 bull, all the elements. You've been through pretty much the peaks and valleys. But what would be super interesting to kind of set the stage for us is how did you catch the digital art bug? How did you get into NFTs, and what was that journey from?
Well, I guess I can try to give a little bit of an overview of my journey on how we led here. And it was actually a little bit, a little bit more. I guess different than what might expect. But the reality is that my wife and I, we met very early in college. We were still teenagers. We were always fascinated and always very participative in the culture, in culture, particularly in the arts. Since the very beginnings, we were teenagers. We were already collecting at the time tangible analog art, but it was something that was very present in our lives. Now, my professional activities took me through the world of technology and in particular through the world of blockchain. So I was heavily embedded for now almost a decade now in this overall ecosystem. And I was lucky that my first interaction with NFTs was through Decentraland, through the metaverse. The Decentraland passed through my desk. I immediately understood the concept they were trying to bring. I had a deep understanding of the technology, and I was I was a big participant around those time. I acquired a lot of land, not only in the central land, but in the subsequent metaverse worlds that came around, Sandbox, Crypto Voxels, and particularly some in space, and it was like probably my big introduction. I did mess around a little bit with CryptoKitties also back in the day, but my big entrance, my real understanding, hey, there's something special here, was through the metaverse. Now, very shortly after that, I also keep on digging in, and I saw what was happening in the digital art space, which at the time it was completely different. There was just literally like not even a handful of collectors, and there was no platforms. There were very few artists, but there was something very obvious to us, and that grew very organic. That there was clearly an explosion of talent innovation happening here. And again, I understood the technology very well. I knew that ownership of digital assets, was a proven thing, and I knew that when the world realized that it was possible, it was going to completely change the landscape in society. So, very organically, because of our love for the arts, my wife and I just started participating, started just engaging with the ecosystem, and we did at the beginning of the times we did a lot of work with many of the artists that we liked and supported outside of the creative component. So helping them think about how to come on through the career, maybe some structure, maybe some pricing, which platforms, getting them closer to the collectors, a little bit of an advisory, if you want to call it in a way, but always without charging a cent. It was always just very organic. We were just having fun through the process. And that led us to where we are right now, where after all of this activity, we quickly became the largest participants in the space. And two very important things I think happened along the way, which we were able to foster these incredible relationships with the artists that go more than just being transactional. We are actually friends, and there's an honest influence both ways that I think it's very rare outside of what we're doing. And then secondly, we're able to collect what is probably known today as one of the most significant, most profound, most curated digital art collections in the world. And it has been a beautiful journey, again, very, very organic. And just a continuation of our collecting journey that I was doing with my wife. There's obviously many things that happen in between that I'm happy to get into more details, but that's a little bit of the condensed story of how I got to where I am now. Yeah.
I love it, Pablo. Well, no, there's so much to dive into. And, one of the things that I've always really appreciated about you as a collector is your eye, especially for emerging talent. And so, one of the things that really stands out to me, a lot of people really focus on, of course, and understandably, that $69 million Beeple sale. But what a lot of people don't remember and know is that you had a big sale with Beeple right before that I think really helped set that up and really prime the market for it. That $6.6 million sale, which you had collected, I believe it was Crossroads, right? For 66K like 4 months earlier. So that was a huge, that was a huge run up. And it was also like, I think, as we said, set the stage for that. Tell us a little bit about how you discovered Beeple and what were some of the lessons that you apply in terms of being like, hey, I see that artist and I recognize that this is going to appreciate and develop.
Yeah, fantastic. Again, it is very important to note that the totality of our decisions are really made for the culture considerations up front rather than the monetary. The reality is that a lot of people that think I do this for a living, I do not. This is how my wife and I really, it's our passion, it's our hobby, it's where we deploy, if it makes any sense. I've deployed many more times than I've taken out. But, for me, the process with Beeple was exactly the same as every other artist as well. Desi and I don't make decisions on acquiring works for the collection just because we like a piece. Of course, it's a consideration, but it's not, okay, here's a work that we think is beautiful. Here, let's go and acquire. What we do is, we see something interesting. We see a concept, we see an idea, we see a visual that we really like, and we really do a deep dive. We want to understand the artist very well. What are the considerations? What are their vision? What are the tools that they're using? How are they thinking? What is the narrative that they're trying to tell? And really go very deep into doing something. So it's very rarely you'll never or pretty much never see us just acquiring a single work. We support artists. We support artists long term and comprehensively with a wider range of works. If you see all of the works in the collection, there's always a large amount of work. So with Beeple, actually the story was fantastic because he was very, very, very smart. Before Beeple came into the space, he had a few conversations with some of the notable players around. And obviously, I was a big participant at the time, and I got to to get on a meeting with him before on a few meetings actually with him before coming into the States. The reality is that during those meetings, I realized that this individual was a power force. One second. Was a power force, and had all of the ingredients to make him a great leader in the space. The reality is that people just didn't come out of nowhere and just appear here and it became people. People had a long history, almost 15 years long, of being the absolute leader of this digital age. And in the conversations, I realized that he had the personality to push forward. He had the discipline to do something interesting. He had the narrative to continue to be a leader, and he had a reputation amongst his peers of being the absolute GOAT in every sense. And he had already done many collaborations with important groups. He had, again, all of the ingredients to just participate and do something meaningful. And I saw that he was an innovator. He was smart. He had all of these things. And honestly, I was very compelled by the narrative of his works. So for me, it was a very easy decision. It was very clear to me that he was going to be a very relevant player in this ecosystem. I didn't expect or know many of the things that were happening, that were going to happen. Sorry, but that was the general thought process, behind. So this was when the first auction came on, I was considering. I mean, I was ready to make sure that I wanted to support and continue to support Mike. And it was a relatively easy decision. At the time when I acquired this, I got a lot of messages saying, "Oh my God, what are back in the day that those prices, the 66,000 was very out there. It was one of the big records in the space, and I not only acquired one, but I acquired two of the works from that release. So it was a few people around where maybe you just went a little bit overboard. But I had the conviction. When we had the conviction when the when you do the research, when you do the things, when you have that conviction, I think it was very, very clear. Now, funnily enough, a few months later, the idea behind the sale wasn't really to sell for the money, even though nobody will lie if they say that they don't like the money. I'm of course comfortable with the money, but it was actually I think it was an important moment to set the stage, to understand that digital art was here to stay, had some real value, had some real interest. It was something really with tangible value along the way, and that it was interesting for the world. So it was more of a type of transaction in order to set the stage for what should came. It is indeed my opinion that it was a major catalyst for the $69 million sale that we saw just a few weeks later. And I think it was probably the big spark of what happened here, even more than that sale. More than that sale increases in many ways. But just honestly happy to be able to participate in something like that, and it's just a very clear and for me very, very obvious trajectory that people was going to take along the way. Yeah.
I love that you always want to do things for the culture, and I think culture is really important because you also bring in some perspectives. We love your Twitter, right? Your Twitter timeline or your X timeline here. You speak very vocally. Some things I agree with. Some things I'm like, oh, Pablo's out there. Like, I don't know, Pablo. I don't know if I want to. I don't know if I
got my popcorn. I got my popcorn ready.
I'm like, should I take a photo with Pablo this week? I don't know. But one of the things that have really resonated with me recently is your take on the responsibility of artists to the collectors, right? I think I would love to dive in because it feels that, and this is one of my opinions, right? And I just want to make sure that this is Alejandro's opinion. This is not NFT Now's opinion. I want to clarify this so for the record here. Over the course of the last 6 or 7 months, I've noticed or observed that there's a lot of entitlement in this space, particularly from artists, as if we, as collectors, tranquilo, no worries, Pablo's a very busy man. And here we are, one of the things that I've observed is that there's a lot of entitlement from the artists in the space demanding from collectors, particularly either resources, capital, or support, right? Like in terms of like, hey, you should buy my art, or you should do this, or you should do that, right? Like it's almost like if you don't buy my art, you're not supporting me, or something along these lines, right? Like, oh, well, I'm showing I'm supposed to be at this price, or I'm supposed to be at this level, or you know what? I don't really care about my previous collectors. I'm trying to make a living, right? And they're diluting the artwork, or they're diluting their provenance in some capacity. I wanted to get your perspective on that and the responsibility between the collector-artist relationship. And I would love to get your take on what is the relationship of the artist in our culture.
Fantastic. If I may, I just want to comment something very quickly about the Twitter component. That again, as many of you know, I'm very very out there with some of my comments. Sometimes they're a little bit controversial, but I try to always be open and try to bring a conversation. Sometimes I'm very happy to change my mind along things when there's a conversation happening, when there's new information. I've actually changed my mind on a few topics, of course, along the way, and I am pretty open to that. I just think that in this general ecosystem, we have, somebody says something and then everybody follows. Nobody, there's no conversation, respectful conversation around, which is, again, we are evolving. This is not written down. This is not very clear. This is something that is continually evolving. And I just, sometimes, the objective there is, again, to engage in conversations with some of the participants in a meaningful, respectful conversation around what are the place that we need to go. But yes, I get punches left and right for some of the things that I do, but I really do it with a positive engagement type of idea, and try to bring the discourse to where I think it's it's relevant. As for the artists, I think this is a somewhat of a complex question to answer, because it's I want to make sure that I don't run like 45 minutes talking about this. But as you can imagine, being so active collectors, we have the development of culture, the development of the artist as our utmost priority. This is really what we are doing, what we're trying to accomplish. What I think, though, is that something that happens in this state, in this ecosystem, that is a little bit dangerous, is that we have pretty much made all of the artists deities of this world, where everything that they say and do, it's always unquestionably perfect. And I think that we have somewhat forgotten in some ways that there's two sides to this equation, and that we can elevate as much as we want artists, but if we also don't think and consider the collectors along the way, then we're going to see some situations like what we saw in the last few months, where we see a lot less activity. We see collector saturation. We see some of the negative consequences of that. So I believe that overall it is artists had an incredible time during probably the 2021 and the early 2022 moment, where they could really solidify their careers in many ways. But I think that now it is part, not all, but part, the overall artist's responsibility to actually bring this to a sustainable and reasonable place for everybody involved. The reality is that I'm seeing artists, as you mentioned, asking for their collectors and for their supporters to always be there for them. Yet I see many artists just going from flower to flower, in this case from platform to platform, just doing a release, 2 weeks later another release, 2 weeks later another release, 2 weeks later another release, and just not being thoughtful about both their practice and about the collectors that support them. None of us have a money tree. None of us have a infinite amount of capital. None of us, the majority of us, don't want to immediately flip things in order to go to the next thing. And if we continue, I guess, doing these things moving forward, we're just going to see less and less activity in the things that are relevant and the things that are relevant. So I would urge, or I would tell the majority of artists, is rather than just continuing doing the same things over and over again, try to focus on doing less, more comprehensive, more thoughtful releases along the way, and bring your collectors and your other supporters along the way, and do something again, more concise. I think that is not the time right now. I think that we're seeing a major collector saturation to really be asking collectors, a lot more, because we are seeing some of them, unfortunately, taking a step back. And I do believe that is incredibly more important. Look, the reality is that we have an infinite more amount of both artists and general supply of good works than we do have of new collectors coming in. And if we, as an industry, as a movement, as a consideration, if we want to be smart, we need to incentivize bringing in more collectors. And the way to do that is, I think, using slightly different avenues than what we're seeing right now.
Yeah, no, Pablo. I remember, your tweet on that kind of caused a little bit of a stir in the space and generated some good debate. I think some of that conversation centered around the idea of loyalty, because I think you'd said that like artists should prioritize like integrity, loyalty, and thoughtful engagement with their supporters. I'm curious if you wanted to just unpack that a little bit as to what you meant by that, because I think a lot of people read different meanings into that than perhaps you meant. And then also, I'd love to hear from your perspective, like, what are some examples of some artists who are doing it right? Or even artists who are doing it wrong in the space, if you want to go there. But like, I just love to hear, your thoughts.
I prefer to the right part that I really
figured.
Maybe loyalty was not the right word, and it can be interpreted in different ways. What I try to mean by that is that we need a little bit more continuity. It needs to be less about like the right now and more about, okay, how are we planning? How are we putting this 5 years, 5 years from now? What is the general strategy? Of course, artists shouldn't have a roadmap. It's not about that. But how do we actually bring something together that makes sense for the audience, that makes sense for the collectors? And how do we also, in a way, the reality is like, look, even if there's many collectors that are doing actually this for the culture, everybody would lie if they told you that they're okay with losing value or losing money along the way. It's just not human nature. We don't nobody likes to lose value. So how do you also protect a little bit of the interest of the counterparty that is actually supporting your career and your practice moving forward? And what I meant by this is that it's very difficult. Even I'm going to bring another concept here. Like we are in a stage where many of the platforms, many of the galleries that are participating in the space, they're disappearing, and it's because again it is not incentivizing for them. When an artist comes to them, they do a release, and then again 2 weeks later they do a release somewhere else. They don't have a cohesive, holistic approach, conversation between the pricing considerations, the supply considerations between all of the parties involved. And I think that this is something that we see more in the traditional art space, where even if a gallery, when I say loyalty, it doesn't mean exclusivity. It doesn't mean like just I do what you say because you are. It's not about that, but just having a little bit more thought around the implications of the actions and of the releases that some of the artists do. And look, in the traditional ecosystem, some artists work with different galleries, but these galleries are in contact, are in conversations. They all go about the exhibitions that they do with a particular artist together. They say, okay, we're going to do this in this city. We're going to do this at this time. We're going to be pricing this collection or this exhibition, around these fields. And it's all a little bit in unison. We're going to control as well the supply here and there. And it's just, we need a little bit of more continuity around because if not, we're going to lose the collectors, but we're also going to lose the platforms. And again, we have a highly fragmented place. It's very difficult even to keep up with all of the different things that are popping up and coming together. And I believe that again, we need to see a general change with this. So what I mean by loyalty is more like thoughtful, long-term approach of how you're going to engage with your audience, and doing so in a way that is, generally structured, even if it doesn't have to be like fully fixed at the time, but generally structured, and taking the considerations of all the parties involved, not only the artists, but of the collectors and of the platforms or the galleries in this case. And I think that there's a few examples of artists that are doing interesting things. I like lately. I like the approach that Death Beef is taking, for example, that. They are participating, they're engaging with their audience, but they're doing so in a concise, in a comprehensive manner, in projects that have a meaning, a narrative. They are comprehensive in nature, and they're not flocking just 1 week to another. They're doing something very, very important here with what they did, for example, the Corona photograph with Lachman Cactoid Labs, which was extraordinary, one of my favorite releases of last year. Then they did the Hash March, which was like, together with the trip, the physical, with the digital, with the time-based work. Like it was an incredible release, and it was a little bit spaced out. Now they did this with Feral Foul and with MoMA. That is also again a continuation of the narrative of the story. I thought that this approach is honestly quite thoughtful, and it can be done. I know that there's conversations in general around. I know that there's support in general between all of the parties involved in what it's doing, and I like that. If I had to highlight one that in the last few months, it's I think it's taking the right trajectory or path. I would say I would say is that one. I also then, as you know, I have a soft spot for Andre Reisinger. I think that he's been very smart about both engaging with the physical, more traditional audience, as well as with the digital audience, with this, physical takeovers, with the digital counterparts, and again doing things staged without with overextending, etc., etc. And I like what Sofia Crespo is really doing. That she's pretty much pull the pull the releases digitally, and just focusing mostly on institutional and major releases along the way, with small drops, small releases here and there, things like that. I like this type of approach of a thoughtful of, hey, let's actually plan to have a lot of success for the next 5 or 10 years, not to immediately try to get as much, I guess, ether as we can right now, and then have like negative consequences. Unfortunately, I'm not going to say the name, but there's a pretty prominent an artist that I absolutely love that is part of my collection. But I think he's one of the most talented artists that we have seen in the space. But we have seen literally like every week he's releasing something, and I think that the collectors and the market is showing the negative consequences even early along their career of doing something like this. And I just, the problem is when going back a little bit to the Twitter, the problem that when I say many of these things, that people just say that like I wake up one day and I choose violence, and it's not what it is. The reality is that I have dozens, and I'm not going to go ahead and write this, but I get dozens of messages every week from artists really, really asking for help. Saying, hey, I'm a little bit lost here. Like I can't even like engage with the audience. I can't do this. I cannot even sell something. And they enjoyed tremendous success in the last few years. And I think that again, we are not setting up the right channels, the right structure for artists to properly evolve. And I think it's a little bit concerning, and something that if you want, we can get even a little bit farther deeper into what are some of the things that I think are needed, in the space moving forward. Yeah.
Yeah, let's go into it. What do you think is what's needed in this space?
Many things. What I just said here. But I think also, by the way, I'm now focusing now on the artists. I also think that the collectors, us collectors, we need to also improve. We need to be first of all more inclusive of the outside. The reality is that we always say that, hey, this is a centralized world, everybody can participate, but we still have massive barriers to entry for people to come into the space and participate. We are, okay, either you think like us, it's like a little bit of a mob, either you think like us and you drink the full Kool-Aid of decentralization, of blockchain, of everything, or you're not really welcome here. And I think that's a general mistake. We need to be super inclusive. We need to make the infrastructure much easier. We need to make the payment rails. We need to price in US dollars. We need to have more physicality to the works. I think all of it is very, very, very important. But one of the things that I think is missing the most here, even though we've made humongous advances here, is we need to be more in the physical, particularly in the institutional world. The reality, I've been speaking with a few of you around this in the last few weeks or months, and I've been engaging, particularly since the MoMA donation of Rafik's work. I've been engaging a lot with institutions, like a lot with all of them. The interest is clearly there. Like they all want to do things, but we're always hitting a point where it's okay. We unfortunately do not have the budget to make this happen in a comprehensive way that I think it relies. And I've been speaking a lot with other institutions in general, and I've learned a little bit of how they operate. And many of them, they have incredible support from both donors and in particular from foundations. For example, the Knight Foundation is a very known and a foundation that really helps advance the arts, contemporary art in particular, and has done major advancements. We do not have neither an institution that is fully focused on this, nor a foundation that makes things happen. Imagine we always say, in crypto, many of the collectors have a lot of money, but I think that we need to really, and I'm in the process of thinking about how to set something up, for this. But we need to have a foundation of some sort that allows for giving grants, to placing exhibitions, to giving residencies, to again supporting digital art, to expand outside of our Twitter echo chamber, and go into the more traditional institutional world. And I think this is something that is imperative. I think it is something that is very, very become very clear in my head. And I hope that when this something like this comes up, that all of the audience, everybody, all the participants, really give a little bit of themselves to make this happen, because the the effects of something like this is palpable. And we saw what Refik and Adol did at the MoMA. I mean, that was a humongous catalyst for like the biggest I can think of really ever in this space to really, bring digital art closer to the people. So this is a little bit of what I'm trying to focus on getting people outside of the direct crypto markets and of the only on Twitter and just saying, hey, how do we have this physicality, this tangibility? The last thing that I will say again is that as you guys know, you've all been to my home. I have converted my home into a little bit of small gallery, small museum, really trying to showcase the works. I host a lot of people. A lot of people every month, over 100 people every month in different ways. Just 2 days ago, I had a group from the ICA, the Important Museum here in Miami. It was about 50 collectors, donors, patrons, and people from the team. And once you have the tangibility, once you're able to show the work, tell the narrative, tell the story, the interest is immediate. So I urge all collectors, all participants, all people to both collectors. You need to show the works at home. Artists, you need to try to make sure that your work is shown around, whether it's in private homes, in residences, in private collections, or institutions. And just overall, we need to incentivize, in my opinion, this tangibility, even though that sounds like a little bit of an oxymoron, but this tangibility of digitally native works, I think is very, very important. Those are a little bit of the comments and of the thoughts that I generally have. And then the last thing I will say is, again, we need to incentivize platforms, and artists need to realize this. Platforms need to survive. In order to survive, they need to raise the fees and they need to do a more comprehensive approach to supporting the artists. They are now doing all of the technical development, they're doing the marketing, they're placing the works, etc., etc. They need to understand that the better platforms, the platforms that are really, really pushing the boundaries, they should expect that the fees also rise a little bit and makes it a sustainable place for all. And again, this doesn't go against the artists. This is the opposite. This is necessary. And these are like observations that I've seen in the more traditional world. And there's a reason why it works like that. Now, of course, there's galleries, there's platforms that are not good, that are extractors rather than the opposite. And we're going to need to find the good ones along the way. But as a concept, as an idea, I believe it's the only way to start looking more, particularly in the art sector, in the art vertical, around some of the traditional ways of doing this. This is my views. Of course, I may be wrong, like I've been wrong so many more times in my life than I've been right. But I strongly, strongly believe that is the path that we need to take.
Yeah, that's really interesting, Pablo. I love the take of bringing things into the physical world. We share that mantra as well here at NFT Now. We have the gateway. We've placed it digital art front and center. Museum grade quality. We want to make sure that the art is experienced not only through your phone or through your computer screen, but actually at scale, right? And something that we did as well, we brought Sense of Healing from Refik, but to the Faina, we put it front and center. But speaking of Refik, and bringing things to the realm, how did that donation? What's the backstory between the MoMA and your donation of unsupervised? We've heard about it. It was very, very transformational. It was historic. How did the deal come around?
Well, I guess it had a little bit of a long story, but my understanding as well as you, by the way, congratulations. What you did here in Miami was, during Miami Art Week was extraordinary. And again, a great show of in my opinion, where we're trying to go, where we need to go. We need this share experience with the art. I think it's very powerful. People don't realize how powerful that share experience becomes and how memorable it is for everybody. It's the way to bring it to the culture. So, similarly, as you know, we did a very quite important show in Miami in 2021 where we brought Refik to the beach as well in Faena, the musical hallucinations choral. And that was the first time that there was really this public art display in this sense, attracting these hundreds of thousands of people and really setting up the stage for Refik. I think that the MoMA realized the effect and the considerations that had there, and that was why the conversation started about doing an exhibition back in the day, an actual physical exhibition in the MoMA back in the day. Now, at first the conversation was solely or mostly about the having an exhibition, so having a loan of the work to be able to show it there. And that was, pretty organic, pretty normal, pretty regular. It was facilitated. The majority of the let's say the initial conversations were done by Casey Rias and the folks at Ferrofile. That really, really, really opened up the avenues for for this to happen. As you know, they had already done the release of the work, a few months prior, the exhibition, and it was again an organic conversation. But once the exhibition was put together, it was so successful. it really brought so many different. The audience that the MoMA started having was completely different to what they were having before, from all ages, all backgrounds, all like literally like a very very wide audience that was just fascinated by engaging with this art. The reality is that it was first scheduled to be there for I think a month and a half or something like that. I think like 6 weeks, and it was so successful that it was extended 5 times. So it was there for almost a full year. It received almost 3 million people visit in person. It completely shattered. Like now they're recording the amount of time that people are spending in front of of some of the works with MoMAs traditionally having Starry Night as the one that people spend the most time. It completely shattered that by many times over the amount of people that were there in front of the work, engaging with the work. So again, it was very very successful. I was super lucky that I was able to participate in the toast, really in the farewell, the day that they were bringing the piece down from the main exhibition there. I was able to spend some time with. It was a team, just a team farewell, just all of the staff that was associated to this exhibition, and he had from the curators, all the way, like all types of staffs, security, everything around, and it was such an incredible, memorable moment where really everybody was touched, and they said that they had never seen anything like that. It was really incredible, the feeling. And the reality is that I think that MoMA realized that this is something that is of today, that is very very relevant, that is certainly art. And then after obviously the success, the conversation started about the bringing into the permanent collection, and it's everything seems like it's a beautiful thing, but it's a tough decision. It's a tough decision because obviously it's a work that is extraordinarily historic, and it has some monetary considerations that are strong, and but I think that it was the right decision. Together with Ryan from One of One, we decided that it was probably the biggest catalyst that we could do. To continue to tell the story, to tell the narrative to the world that this is here to stay. This is really relevant, and we decided to go forward with the donation. But it was very organic, and it went, let's say, step by step as things were developing, over time, and we're just very happy to be able to participate and to make this happen. Yeah.
I love that, Pablo. I was just with Rafiq in London for his Serpentine exhibition, and he told me, I think, that people were spending an average of 36 minutes, like in front of the unsupervised, which is unheard of. Like just blows, like you said, blows everything else out of the water. Which is amazing. And I got to see it in New York. It was stunning. And, people were entranced. You could see it was people from all different backgrounds, people who definitely were seeing it for the first time, who did not know what an NFT was or anything like that. So I'd love to also hear, obviously, Rafiq has also received some criticism from some of the traditional art world, the Jerry Saltzes of the world, all that. It comes with the territory. I'm curious to hear too, like, what do you think makes Rafiq special, and also like how do you think like the history books will kind of look back at his work in the context of like of larger movements like AI art and the such that we're seeing?
Yeah, so I mean, so many things really that could be said about the Jerry Schultz idea. The reality is that I have a very strong and direct comment about that. I actually engage, with that, and I think that it's okay, and we should be more open as a space to having criticism. I think it's important. I think it evolves the space, but that wasn't criticism. That was a straight up attack. It was personal. It didn't go through it didn't do the necessary research, and it's okay if that was the conclusion. But it was the delivery and both the research behind it was just not there. I think it was more of Jerry just trying to get a little bit of more following and just engagement in Twitter. But I thought it was extraordinarily disrespectful. And I commented this on the tweet. I don't know if you saw my comment as well. But it was one of the very few that he didn't really respond because again, there's a way to do the criticism, and I applaud criticism. I think it's important, but that was not the way. The reality is that Rafiq has something that is very, very important, I think, for everybody, that, you can engage, and this applies also to other, I think, digital art, but you can really, really engage with the work without being an art connoisseur. I think it's very engaging for people from all walks of life. And I think that really is very important because it breaks a barrier that we currently had in the traditional ecosystem. The reality is that a lot of the audience, a lot of the people, if you're not an art connoisseur, if you're not an art lover, usually there's less appeal in going to a museum. What we come to realize, though, is that everybody likes culture along the way. Everybody likes art along the way. It's just that it wasn't really accessible. There were these barriers. And I think that Refik really breaks this. So it makes him very special for many, many things. But first of all, he's at the absolute forefront of the tools that he uses. The reality is that it would be very difficult for me to think of somebody that is using AI, at least his considerations of AI, like Refik is doing. He's highly, highly advanced in what he does. Then he's trying to bring a narrative that at the time was unique. Now there's more people that are obviously following a little bit of Refik's path, but what's unique in that approach of how do humans, machines, and data really collaborate to express art in the current age with the current tools that we have available, that I think is very relevant. And then most importantly as well, I think, or not most importantly, but as very, very importantly, I think that Refik is an incredible flag for the space. He's an incredible individual. He's just alludes to just happiness and positiveness and advancement forward. He experiments. He's present. He relates to many things that we all relate to, in particular nature as well. I think that his work actually carries a narrative that is very, very compelling and that is very, very important. Actually, he collaborates a lot. He does a lot of philanthropic work. He does, he's always engaging with just so many things around his practice that I think make him an incredible symbol. But again, I think that even today, even of some of the copycats that might be, showing around, I think that Refik has a depth to both their narrative and to the technique that I think makes him particularly unique and particularly engaging. I think he's going to look back as a huge pioneer, as somebody that really brought the masses into the art. And I think that he's going to continue to be a major leader in the space, and he deserves it because he's been, again, Refik is not somebody that just appeared 4 or 5 years ago and just started doing something here. He had been working on these ideas, on this practice now for a very, very long time, being an absolute master of their tools, having all of the ingredients. He's a genius, one of the biggest geniuses I've ever met or spoken with in my life. He's a researcher, a professor, so many other things that really make him, fantastic. And honestly, the way that he engages with his audience, I think, is an example for everybody. So I am a huge fan of Refik, and I think that he'll continue to do beautiful and amazing things along the way.
One of the things that I really appreciate about you is that, coming back to full circle, is how much you think about not only the artist, but also the culture element of things and how society can actually engage with the art and the piece. But something that you mentioned is, in gifting this to the MoMA, the financial consideration that went through things. And you, earlier in our conversation, you mentioned that you value art in USD, right? And it's one of the mantras of blockchain, or particularly Ethereum, is that 1 ETH equals 1 ETH, right? And that's that's a mantra that exists. So not one that everyone shares, but it's one that does exist, right? But I want to talk about 2 points here, because you set a new record earlier this week with the bullshit 101 people taking out a loan against it on Gandhi. You set the record. I think it's $400,000 US. Yeah. So $400,000 US. And so let's talk about the significance of that loan, what it's going to do to the art market, the digital art collectible market, and then why is it so important to you to denominate the digital art in USD versus in its native token of Ethereum?
All right, maybe you'll have to remind me of all the 3 questions along the way so I don't get lost.
No problem. It's a 2-part question. Yeah, it's a 2-part question.
What I mentioned about the Refik financial considerations at the moment is that, as you know, again, nobody likes to lose value, and it's always very difficult, even if we ultimately, of course, did the right decision. But this is obviously a work that was worth many millions of dollars, and even though there's some financial attractiveness, I would say, not really slightly fiscally efficient way, so that this is a little bit less painful than other things. It's still a major consideration. Now, I think that this is a little bit tied with the US dollars. It's a little bit tied to what I was saying before. The reality is that we have 250, 500, maybe 1,000 participants in this, let's say, more crypto-esque ecosystem that are maybe thinking about Ether. The reality is that if I go to a more like a folk, a friend of mine, somebody that I know from this space, and I tell them about Ether, they're like, but what is this? I think in US dollars. I think it's one of the barriers to entry that I was talking about before. It's like it's impossible. Ether is way too volatile for it to be a sustainable way to price things. Now I know that the space has conceptually been trading in many ways in Ether, but I really believe that Ether is an incredible innovation. I am super pro Ether and what it brings, but it's just not a currency. It was not set up for it to be a currency. It was set up to be other things. Now, of course, this can evolve, and this might be at a time where it is, but we cannot set a sustainable practice for artists if we're thinking about Ether terms, because nothing happened in your practice and Ether is up 50% in the last 30 days, and your work is now 30%, 50% higher. I am sorry, but this is not something that's going to go into the more regular folks. The reality is that Ether and this ecosystem has now been here for a long time. I have a lot of my friends that participated, particularly through that Nifty time, back in the day, the Nifty Gateway time back in the day. And the reality is that a few of them are not participating anymore. And if they do, they're going to be thinking in US dollars. So I think that, again, that conversation needs to completely be very, very, very clear that if we want to have appeal to the outside world, I think that we need to start thinking about, US dollars. Again, for me in particular, getting this loan in US dollars for that reason, just to start solidifying things in US dollars, but also, the reason why I did this, why I took the loan, is not a financial consideration. Meaning, I don't need the $400,000. It's not that I'm going to use them for something else in that way. It's more about to open up the avenues. For digital art that I can go a little bit deeper. But answering your question, I just in no way, shape, or form was I going to be open to taking the volatility risk of a $400,000 denominated in Ether, because Ether can move up or down a lot, and particularly if it moves up, it becomes a problem that makes it extraordinarily expensive to consider this loan. At the end of the day, we live. I don't know about you guys, but I pay for my food in US dollars. I pay for my gas in the car in US dollars. I don't know. We live life in US dollar denominated ecosystem, and we need to be mindful as well about how we develop these things. But for me, again, this loan was again another moment to show that this is there's tangible value here. There's staying power here. There's these are real assets that whenever we can continue to evolve and mature on the infrastructure around, on the market around what is happening here, while doing so in a thoughtful and non-crazy way, I think that really opens up the avenues for more liquidity for the better work. So it will both sustain the prices for some of the better works, as well as, more importantly, it will incentivize the acquisition of other works as well, of more participants coming, knowing that there are some financial avenues as well, in case something is needed, which is always relevant. This is something that exists in the traditional world as well. It's not something new to this. It is just that we need to start developing step by step, little by little, these resources that collectors can have, and hopefully start bringing the rates a little bit down, start bringing the LTVs a little bit up. But I thought it was important to solidify something, and it was historic because we've seen obviously punks with the G Money. He's a major pioneer. I'm a big fan of G Money and what they do, and very inspired by what they did. But they did that bigger scale. But that was a punk that has more collectible and market-based considerations. There's it's the same about some of the bigger collections, some of the Fidenza, some of the Ringers, some of the in general the art blocks, generative collections that have some components that make it also akin to more collectibles, like larger collections. They have a big market, they have more liquidity around them, etc., etc. I think it was relevant because it was more akin to a regular, tangible artwork. It was a one-of-one, and it was a quite a big number, for a piece that is outside of its own collection. It's a single, unique, one-of-one, relevant, let's call it fine artwork in this case. And I think that, again, if we start seeing a little bit more of this, if we start, hopefully we'll see a Refit coming through not far from here. Hopefully we'll see some other artists, even it doesn't have to be at this level, but some of the artists really seeing that there's support around. I think it helps establish, that tangible value that we were talking about all along. And I think it's very important, and that was the reason. That was the reason why why I did it. I wanted to continue to open up the different avenues, trying to support the growth of this ecosystem in different ways. As you know, I have less of an interest on the financial aspect of considerations. Actually, this has a cost to me, obviously because of the interest. But I thought it was important. I thought it was important to put it out there. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I love that perspective, Pablo, and I'd love to dig in a little bit too, because I know we recently saw Ethereum rise from around like 3K to 4K. Obviously, it's retraced a bit since, but like that kind of spurred this debate around like how artists should price their works, right? Because you look at something differently when it's 2 ETH looks a lot different at 4K than it does at 2K, right? And so I know a lot of artists were wondering like, should I be pricing it? Should I keep it steady? Should I bring it down to keep it at the same USD value? I know Claire Silver had tweeted being like, she prices in ETH, not fiat, because this was her perspective. If she were to do otherwise, collectors that support her, she sees would be better off of just holding that ETH. I'm curious, like from your perspective, weighing these kind of factors at play, which is like, artists wanting to do right by their previous collectors, but also recognizing the market realities that exist when ETH has appreciated in this way. Like, what from your perspective, how should artists approach that in terms of pricing when they thinking about the USD and ETH elements?
Yeah. So again, I think that more than having some thoughts, I had some observations of what I've seen. This is not something new. Whenever Ether is very, very volatile, like it is right now. This conversation like rises has happened now a few times in the last few years, and I think that don't believe me, just look back. The chain shows everything. Look back and see what happened to many of the artists, for example, at Super Rare at the beginning times of this that they were pricing in ETH. The reality is that when ETH moves up or down, it stops activity heavily. It stops activity for different ways. This narrative for the artists always makes sense. No, I'm going to keep my Ether pricing as Ether goes up. But then when Ether goes down, they don't want to keep Ether pricing. They want to raise the Ether price and keep the dollar. So I think that we need a little bit more consistency along the way. If you're gonna choose, again, everybody's free to do what they wish, as long as they're not messing with other people. But conceptually very libertarian in thought process. But I strongly believe that it's just not a stable way of setting your own market. The reality is that if we want this to continue to expand, the majority of new participants will not be solely thinking, the collectors will not be solely thinking in Ether. Even the funds that are active today, they're all denominated in US dollar, whether we like it or not, and whether we use Ether as a medium, as a payment. It needs to be priced, in my opinion, in dollars. And I think, honestly, for me, stability, continuous growth is so much more important than anything else. And it is my opinion this can only be achieved with a thoughtful, balanced US dollar approach. Going back to what I was saying before, again, Ether is up, 50% in the last month, I think, or something like this. And I think that, nothing has changed really in the artistic practice of the space for everything to just be 50% higher for whoever comes in. It's just not serious. It's just not sustainable, for some time. And then, what happens is again that the same thing that will happen. That it's a death sentence for many of these artists. Maybe they get a sell or two at a price that is slightly too high, and then it's just not sustainable for them. They don't have the collector base, and they cannot sell farther. And then what are they going to do? Because if they now lower completely the prices to a lot more, then they're messing with the latest collector. So my strong recommendation, I always tell all the artists, I'm very, very strong thought about this, is look, accept any form of payments. If they want to pay you with anything, I was told that since very young, like, you take the money, you take the payment in whatever currency, it comes. But think in US dollars, and think in US dollars because it's going to make it a lot more sustainable, a lot more clear, over time. The reality is that as we evolve, we're seeing more and more players, more and more participants, particularly on the platform, on the gallery sides, that again might accept Ether, but are thinking in US dollar terms. Again, this might not apply to absolutely everything, even though I think it should. So I know that some of the longer form generative works and some of the PFPs might make a little bit more sense, but still then I would do that. And the reality is that if we actually look deeper, there's a high correlation of the changes in markets that we're seeing in the changes in Ether prices with the volatility that we see in Ethereum. And again, the more that it expands, the more that it matures, the more that this is even more obvious. And we've seen it. We've seen it that even in the large collections, even in the punks, the different things, as Ether rises, the prices of these collections in Ether terms is certainly going down, and I think this is going to be even more apparent over time. So I'm a huge. If I could say something, like, really, this is one of the most important things we need to be, particularly for artists. Look, for collections and everything, and for NFTs as a whole, I reserve my right to not comment, or to not get engaged. But for artists, my huge recommendation: if I go to a friend of mine, collector, more traditional collector, and I tell him, hey, like, this is through Ether, they'll immediately shut me down and be like, what are you talking about? Like how much is, like, tell me how much it is, I'll send a wire. It's a little bit different, conversation. And my recommendation is that if you want to expand your audience, and again, we think that we have millions and millions of people participating in this ecosystem. We don't. Let's be frank. We don't. We have a problem of bringing in new people, and the way to do it is being less ether-centric, in my opinion. It's one of the ways to do it is less ether-centric, in my opinion.
So on that point, I wanted to ask you, bringing new people in, BlackRock just announced their new Ethereum asset fund, right?
Yes.
And their focus is, like, what is it? If I'm not mistaken, it's a $5 million minimum, again, denominated in USD.
Yes, of course.
But they're looking to invest in the ecosystem as a whole. And the Ethereum ETF is a conversation that's happening very seriously right now at the government level. Do you believe, or are you of the school that the Ethereum ETF is going to expand into the marketability of Ethereum and the different assets within Ethereum? Because Bitcoin's very much they're using the ETF as a store of value, right? Like, they're really looking at it as a commodity from that perspective. But Ethereum, from your perspective, bringing in these institutional players, is the art going to be the first thing that they also look into outside of the Ethereum itself?
Well, I don't know. I certainly think it's going to expand the horizon for what's happening here. But what I think, again, is that, look, it's okay to invest in Ether as an investment. I completely see that component of it. I'm not saying people, like, forget about Ethereum at all, or not participating, investing in Ethereum as this. I think it's going to open up the avenues. But as you say, look, the BlackRocks, everybody else from the traditional finance or for the traditional world is looking at this in dollars. I do think that, again, having BlackRock, and not only BlackRock, but all of the other participants that are coming into the space, are obviously going to open up the avenues. And, once you start involving yourself, once you start having some exposure, then you start getting a little bit deeper inside. But I don't think it's going to be BlackRock directly coming in for our JPEGs, as they like to say. I think it's going to be more of a BlackRock opening up the gates for more and more people to start understanding Ethereum, understanding the considerations of digital ownership as well underneath it, and some of the explosive talent innovation that we're seeing here. And it's going to have positive effects over time rather than direct purchasing. I might be wrong. Maybe the next fund that they do is just to invest in digital art, but I would be surprised if that was the case. But I do think that it's gonna open the horizon to a lot of people that are gonna a lot of groups and people that are gonna put their first their foot into this ecosystem and start learning a little bit more, which undoubtedly opens up the space for everybody else.
There it is. Well, let's jump into it. We have our rapid fire segment, bullish or bearish, coming up. So we're going to throw out a topic. You tell us, bullish or bearish. You're welcome to elaborate, or if you want to keep it succinct, you can. But let's kick it off. I want to hear your thoughts, Pablo. Bullish or bearish on artist royalties being respected in Web3?
Very, very, very bearish on that. And actually, if I might want to expand, I was a humongous. This is one of the things, for example, where I changed my mind over time. As I was saying before, I was a big proponent of the idea of royalties. I think that we now have the technology to improve them, and honestly, I think it's a very honorable thought. It's a very positive thought that we want artists to to participate in the rise of their careers, in a more meaningful way. But I think that the data shows otherwise. The reality is that we've seen that first of all, whenever there's a market, an efficient market where people can not pay the fees I think that a lot of people will try to not do that. So it's going to be very difficult to even enforce. I believe it's going to be very difficult to enforce. Secondly, I think that incentives work whether you partake in them or not. And the reality is that this incentivizes artists to oversupply, because with more supply, even if the price goes a little bit lower, you're getting the royalties, along the way, and it might make up for it. And this is it incentivizes to oversupply, and I think that oversupply is one of the biggest problems that we have. The main issue that we have in the space at the moment, there was just too much supply, across. And then thirdly, I think it's a major tax on newcomers. So the reality is that I cannot think of another asset class where, and again, I don't want to call these assets like an asset class, but it's important to understand because this is a financial consideration. I cannot think of any other asset class when you immediately go in and you're 10% down immediately. If we're trying to encourage and we're trying to incentivize, more and more people to come in, it's quite difficult to say, okay, well, now in order to even try to make an investment, you need to make at least 10%. From 10% in the more traditional world, even though for the movement in the camera, even though now in the traditional world, like in here we see 200% gains, in a matter of a week sometimes. The reality is this is not normal. This is not going to be sustainable forever, and it's going to be a difficult thing to do. So again, I think that we need to, I would be more okay with dynamic royalties. So, for example, royalties that change over time depending on the game, and whether for sure no royalty if it's lower, if you sell the work for lower than what you acquired for. I think it's ridiculous. Like, okay, so I supported your career, then you decided to go and not make the right decision, so your work is going down, and then I have to sell for a loss and also pay you along the way. I think again the incentive system is just not there for artists and for collectors to make the right decisions along the way. So I would heavily, and I also say this: look, aside from very, very, very like less than a handful of artists that are playing more on the larger collection size, akin to like how maybe Daniel Ashton does in the more traditional world. Aside from that, the reality is that this is going to represent such a small component of what artists can achieve through primaries if they do also do their right decisions. That all of the artists here are young, they're engaging, they still have their full careers ahead of them. My strong recommendation is, if you want to really do it well, try to focus on making your primary as well. That is going to be significantly more important. Everybody's fighting about this when it's really bringing artists less than 1% of their overall income. And I recommend all of the artists that I work with to not apply royalties with them. Yeah. And again, this is something that we had in Aries back in the day. There's something that I've supported. I am probably the collector of fine digital art that has paid the most royalties over time, 7 figures in royalties, along the way. And I was very happy and thoughtful about that proposal. But over time, I think that the data is showing me otherwise.
I love the way you always change your mind. It's really good. On that, changing of your mind, bullish or bearish Bitcoin ordinals?
This is something that I have less information about. I've done less research, and I've been less involved than I would like. I do think that I'm overall bullish, but more on the collectible side of it, more than the artistic side. I do not think that for the time being we will see some major art considerations in Bitcoin ordinals. I do think though that for collectibles, it's a very, very, very compelling idea. I have nothing against it. I think it's very, very valid, and I think it's going to continue to be very well received for a very long time. I think that Bitcoin has even more staying power even today than Ethereum does. Yes.
Boom. Bullish or bearish AI art?
Very bullish, but not as in a very concise way. So I believe that there's a big difference between utilizing AI as the output and putting a prompt here and there, or using some generic AI, and then artists that really use AI as a tool to really express themselves. It's the same that I always say about generative art, that sometimes it lacks a little bit of soul. It's very different. You can create beautiful code, but the point here, if you want to actually make an art, is to express yourself through code, not to write the beautiful code, which is a good thing. It's an important thing of part of the process. If you want to be a good generative artist, you need to write beautiful code and be very, very talented in the code. But it is more about what are you trying to tell with that. So it's the same with AI. So artists like Sofia Crespo, that is, I have a massive obsession with. Artists like Anna Rittler, of course, artists like Refika Nadol. I find Boto extraordinarily compelling. I think Boto is one of the most amazing stories that we have in this domain. It brings so many questions around art, around the concept. I think Boto is an incredible example of what's happening here. I like what Helena Sarina does as well. She's extraordinary. But I watch out. I do think that we're going to see a major oversupply in AI, and there's going to be those artists and creatives that are actually using their proprietary AIs and really expressing themselves through the tools that are the select few who are going to make it. But I'm very bullish on that. Yeah.
Amazing. All right. Bullish or bearish, the gateway? I have to ask.
No, I'm very bullish here. I think it brings together all of the things that we just discussed, throughout this conversation. I think that in particular, bringing that tangibility, that shared experience, that museum quality presentation, all of these things are incredible move forwards for the ecosystem, and that are taking us, a lot more seriously. So I think it's a highly positive thing, and I please continue doing it. Please continue doing it. Yes.
Thank you, Pablo. Well, look, great conversation, man. Love having you on, and look forward to continuing the conversation in the future.
Thank you very much for having me.
Yeah.
And it's been a pleasure speaking with you. And very happy to participate and engage with you. And thank you for everything that you do. I think that you're incredible participants. You really make a lot to push this ecosystem forward. You're highly supportive of the creatives and the other participants in here. And I think that, again, your role is paramount for what we're trying to achieve overall as an ecosystem. So thank you very much for what you do. And thank you for having me over.
Thank you, Pablo.
Thank you.
Well, that conversation did not disappoint when it came to spicy takes and potentially feather ruffling statements. But no, I loved it. What stood out to you, man?
I wish I had more popcorn, to be honest, so I could just, I think from that perspective. No, there was a lot of things that really stood out for me, but one in particular was his responsibility around collector-artist relationship to the ecosystem as a whole, right? And the other thing that really stands out for me from that perspective is like every single move that he does it for the culture, right? And he's rewarded for it. Obviously, he does like the financial compensation, but that's not the spearhead of his moves, right? Like he's always about setting precedent, setting this, opening up the space, or making the pie bigger, or expanding the perspective of it. And you see that very, very actively from the Beeple sale he did before the $69 million for the $6 million sale. Even before the sale of that, pricing it at $66,000, right? Like that in itself was a big move and to expand the market in that capacity. And then the second thing that I really liked is the move to gift to the MoMA, right? Like a Rafik of that nature unsupervised. It's really a historic art piece for the industry and the culture itself. So that in itself, that altruism is really good. And the second take that I really enjoyed from him was the ETH USD conversation of the pricing of it, because there are going to be new entrants. Retail is coming, especially with the ETH ETF conversations happening. You know, we mentioned about the BlackRock coming in with their new Biddle asset fund for Ethereum. So it's just very interesting as to why and how he prices, which made complete sense. You know, for me, it actually left me thinking, am I an ETH equals ETH? Right, I'm actually now in on the fence on this, because he made it a very great point that established artists and the art should be really denominated in USD. So he's changing my mind. I don't know if it's changed just yet, but there's definitely some changes.
Yeah, look, I appreciated all of those elements. One thing I really appreciated as well was him talking through like being early to Beeple, his thoughts on like Rafiq's legacy. Sometimes it's easy to forget that we're living a chapter of art history right now, and a lot has happened in a short amount of time, and so getting his perspective, having been involved in some of these like really interesting narratives and storylines, I thought was great. And again, I just think he bridges the traditional art world perspective while still being savvy and understanding the crypto native perspective in a really unique way. And he's not afraid to speak his mind, even if it's not what people want to hear.
Absolutely, guys. And without further ado, that was the Pablo episode. But please subscribe to the newsletter. And when you're subscribing to the newsletter, please give us 5 stars on this comment review on this podcast. We appreciate everything that you guys have done for us as a community. And, this is a labor of love. We do this to make sure that you guys are up to date with the latest happenings, with giving you direct access to the creators, the builders, the collectors, and the movers and shakers of our community and industry. And so we'd really appreciate if you guys can give us a 5-star. And if you do the comment, reach out to us, DM us, send us an email, and we'd love to hear from you guys. And thank you so much for this episode, and we'll see you guys next week.